And welcome back, everybody, to the Law and Crime Network this afternoon. I'm your host, Rachel Stockman, alongside Misty Maris, and we are going to continue with those top 10 trial moments here on the Law and Crime Network in just about 20 minutes or so. But first, we want to have a really important discussion about sexual assault and sexual harassment in the workplace. It's something that obviously you all have heard in the media with more and more high-profile men being outed as being accused sexual harassers and sexual assault. We've had just in the last couple of days, Charlie Rose be accused by multiple women of sexually harassing and assaulting them. I mean, some of the conduct he's accused of doing, like walking around naked, groping people, saying sexual comments, is just really gross, and it's just horrifying. To have this discussion, Misty Maris, who's also a host, is going to be here because she's really important to this. She's an attorney, and she represents companies, a lot of companies that end up facing lawsuits. And we also have with us Natalie Zammatti Shaw, who represents a lot of the plaintiffs in these cases, women that come forward and say these things have occurred and end up suing their workplace or suing the men involved. So I think this is going to be a very interesting discussion because we have attorneys from both sides of this. So first off, let's start off the discussion by saying, what do you make of all these women coming forward now?
Well, I really think that at this moment, there's a great side to this movement, which is people feeling that they have the ability to come forward, to tell their stories, to talk about what happened to them, and maybe even change some of what seem to be the social impediments to really making these claims at the time that they happen. People oftentimes, and I hear this all the time when I am doing a deposition or interviewing witnesses, a lot of people don't feel that they can come forward because they fear repercussions. Hopefully that culture has gone away, because one important thing, and as I said, I work on the corporate side, I do defend companies in these lawsuits, and one thing I always tell them, take every single allegation of sexual harassment, discrimination seriously, and make sure that your employee knows they're protected and have the ability to come forward. The company can't protect someone unless they tell them that something is happening. So it's a really important thing that women feel emboldened to be able to come out and talk about this at the time so somebody can help them when it's happening.
And Natalie, what's your take on what's going on now?
I think there is a sweep within the country regarding fear leaving women and being able to come forward and come out and discuss this. This toxic culture of workplace harassment is now taking a turn, I believe. And what's so great, I mean, this year marks 40 years since the 1977 decision in Barnes versus Costell. And that was really laid the groundwork for protections against sexual harassment. And I feel that women are starting to become empowered. And the more women that come out and discuss this and rally together, there will be a greater movement. This is just the beginning of the wave that we're seeing here. And I think that women must feel comfortable in coming forward and discussing what has occurred in the workplace. While there are companies that have policies and procedures in place, it's actually implementing them and making the workforce comfortable in utilizing those policies. And it's not just about teaching your employees about what the particular policies are or what the standards should be, but it's actually making them feel comfortable that they can do that they are not going to be the ones that are going to be looked on as the villain in that instance.
So let's broaden this conversation a little bit, because I want to know, as we're dealing with this, people are getting very sensitive, and maybe they're going a little to the extreme. I saw some people, one prominent columnist who worked at Politico, who was the labor editor, suggests that, we should just ban all closed-door meetings whatsoever in offices. And, in my mind, that's kind of an overreaction, because a lot of times things get done in closed-door meetings and you need them, and every closed-door meeting doesn't mean someone's going to get sexually harassed. But what's the line when you're in a professional setting, Misty? And I know you do a lot of these seminars for companies. Like if a woman walks in and she's looking nice, and she did her hair nice, and her boss says, "Wow, Misty, you look," and it's a male boss. "Wow, Misty, you look really, really nice today." Is that sexual harassment?
In that context, just that alone, no. But could those words mean something different if they're accompanied by maybe some other sort of visual action, something else in print? Is there more to the story? Is there any sort of touching, something like that? It could be. Everything is so fact sensitive. But you're right. Not everything rises to the level of sexual harassment from a legal standard and what you could go into a courtroom, argue, and maybe win a civil case or talk to the police about a criminal case. Not everything rises to that level. However, anything that makes someone feel uncomfortable in the workplace, the key is that that person has the ability, knows what to do to report that conduct and to say, "Hey, look, this person said XYZ to me, it made me feel very uncomfortable," and that the company takes prompt corrective action for that, investigates if there's an egregious situation. Something like this is different. As you said, those words sound very innocuous the way that we just talked about them. In a vacuum, no, that's not harassment. In a vacuum, somebody asking a person out on a date once that they work with isn't harassment. 2, 3, 4 times, it can always possibly rise to that level, which is why it's so important that employees know what to do when they do feel uncomfortable and need to speak to somebody, and that the company really implements those procedures.
So I guess the only thing that then is a bit troubling from maybe the male perspective or whatever, whoever's the person actually giving that compliment out, is if you're telling me that this is dependent on the person and fact sensitive, one person may take what you say to mean something that you totally don't mean. Like, you know, a guy, your boss could say you look nice and mean it in the most casual, non-offensive way, but a woman could be ultra sensitive. Maybe something previously happened in her life that made her really ultra sensitive, I don't know, and could take that to mean harassment. So then should you just never say anything nice to someone?
And you're right, Rachel, and that's why it's very difficult. But that is where the legal standard is it's not that I necessarily have to say something to you hypothetically, and my intent is to make a sexual innuendo or to harass you. It doesn't have to be that. It's how you perceive it. And is it reasonable? Would a reasonable person also find that offensive? So the law is there and is built in order to say, yes, you personally are offended, but also in order to rise to that legal standard, a reasonable person would have had to be offended. So even if something's reported to the company, hypothetically, something like you just said, "Wow, Rachel, you look really great today." You report that to the company looks at the situation, they say, "Okay, there was really no instance of harassment here, but what can we do to make you feel comfortable? We're not going to fire the person who said it to you. We're not going to suspend them, but we are going to take your perspective seriously, and we are going to make sure that we conduct a proper investigation." And that's how a company protects itself from liability down the line.
Very interesting. So, Natalie, as more and more of these allegations come out, we're seeing many of them really being a situation of he said, she said. And so if the men admit to it, that's one thing. But, you know, some of the time, a lot of the time, the men deny it. In a situation like this, where a woman feels like she's being harassed in the workplace, what's the best way she can go about making her case legally down the road? I mean, do you want to keep emails? Can you record your boss saying things to you?
Absolutely.
Tell us what a woman should do if they feel like they're really being harassed at work.
Any tangible evidence is always better than none in that he said, she said situation. Any emails, any photographs, any recordings in the state of New Jersey. If you're having a communication with another party, you are allowed to tape record that conversation. It is a legal recording. And you can utilize that later on down the line in a case. I mean, again, any tangible evidence like that is always better than not.
Okay, so Misty's not so sure about this because can you just go around recording anyone you want in the workplace? There's some factors that may come in.
There's some factors that may come in. First of all, you could review, first and foremost, there might be policies regarding recording people in the workplace that could be at play. Also, as Natalie pointed out, that varies state by state.
Sure.
New York is actually different than New Jersey, and so there's other places where a one-party conversation, one-party consent is not enough. You have to have both people consenting to that type of tape recording. So it can be different state to state. Also, I think one thing that is really important for companies to know, there are certain defenses. If you do have reasonable measures in place to prevent sexual harassment, this is reporting procedures, employee handbooks, all of that, and somebody fails to utilize those procedures, you have a defense there. It's called the avoidable consequences doctrine. It's under, in a federal claim, you can use that. Some states have different rules that give employees more protection, but that's where this issue lies. Of course, if you have emails, you've got to save them. If you have conversations with someone that you want to note, you have to document them. But a problem that comes up in these cases is that it's never reported to the company. And that contemporaneous reporting is a huge factor in a court of law.
So let's talk about that, because with Charlie Rose particularly, many of the allegations we first heard about happened, decades ago in the 1990s. We've now seen some more allegations coming out more recently, specifically involving employees at CBS, where he currently worked. He was fired, so he doesn't work there anymore. In a situation, so far I haven't seen any reports that any of these women directly notified HR or any powers that be at CBS. Maybe they did, we don't know at this point. But in your mind, and I'll ask first to Natalie, could CBS or PBS, where Charlie has worked for a long time, face any kind of liability for these allegations?
Yes, I believe if they knew, let's just say that these women, or some of these women, reported this conduct to CBS, their inaction is even more contemptible than Charlie Rose's itself, and that a network that ignores these accusations is absolutely responsible. In the instance of Fox, you could say it was financial gain, that, was the reason behind that. But it's the same thing for CBS, okay? Is it financial gain? It seems like the tolerance level is greater than zero for someone in a position such as Charlie Rose and everyone else that has come before and or will come after that is in a position such as his. So do I think that the network will be held responsible? Ultimately, yes. They are responsible. They're responsible for the actions of their employees, especially when it's as widespread as what we're hearing now, that there are, as of today, 8 women that have come forward that work there. So I do think at the end of the day, they are even more responsible than the actual accused.
Misty, since you played the defense attorney in this in terms of representing the companies, what's your response to Natalie's take that CBS and others will be liable or could be liable?
The answer is they absolutely could be, but it really depends on the facts as they play out. We don't have enough facts to know whether or not CBS would be held liable for Charlie Rose's conduct, so that's twofold. We talked about one defense before under the federal law, which is if the company was not made aware and the people that are now coming forward never made a complaint and utilized those complaint procedures. Now, I haven't reviewed CBS employee handbook, but I guarantee a corporation like that absolutely has HR, has complaint procedures. It's not like a mom and pop shop that might not have that. So they certainly do. And if they did not utilize those procedures, there's potentially defenses for the employer there where they would not be held responsible. Now, as a side note, in New York and in some other states like California, if somebody is a supervisory level, their conduct can be automatically imputed to the company. Forget about that notice requirement. So that's a possibility. Whether or not Charlie Rose would be considered a supervisor, I don't know. It would depend on that situation. So there's the possibility that liability does exist for CBS. There's the possibility that if other executives found out about the conduct but never took action, you're required to take affirmative action when you're in certain positions at a company. And if you don't act reasonably, to correct that conduct, not only could that be imputed to the company, there could also be liability for that individual under what's called aider and abetter. So you didn't take reasonable action. Sometimes a lot of HR representatives are often named in those types of cases if they didn't look to rectify or investigate. What CBS did, taking Charlie Rose out, suspending him, that's what they should have done once these allegations came to light. If they knew about it before, it should have happened then. And I'm not saying that he doesn't deserve the benefit of due process. He does. An investigation, he does, like anyone who's accused. But that's what needs to happen. Pull them out, investigate, and find out exactly what went on to make sure that all of your employees are protected, both the accuser and the accused.
And Misty, I want to turn to this tweet. I put it in here. Hopefully we can pull it up on the screen. It was by a feminist who runs a group, and she also is a Teen Vogue columnist, and it's raised a bit of controversy. She said, "Here's an unpopular opinion. I'm actually not at all concerned about innocent men losing their jobs over false sexual assault harassment allegations." So we're flipping this on its face here, in that, you know what, likely most of the allegations coming forward, and again, I don't know this, but it looks like many of them are 100% true. However, when you have a flood of people coming forward and the standards journalistically, in my opinion, being lowered in terms of what's fit to print and not, there's always a potential that someone could be falsely accused. And what's happening now is companies are taking immediate action as soon as the accusation comes about in firing people. So what's your response to that tweet? Actually, we'll go to Natalie first, specifically about maybe innocent men losing their jobs over accusations.
I think if the accusations are founded, which I believe by these companies doing their internal investigations when it does get reported to them, and releasing them from their jobs immediately. I don't know how innocent these actual men are. There is internal processes and internal investigations within these companies and their HR departments that are set up specifically to come to some sort of resolution between the accuser and the accused. Again, these innocent men, they are all men of entitlement and power in these positions. And, again, these companies do their proper investigation and have made determinations to release them from their positions at this particular point in time.
But do you think that that's entirely fair without doing a thorough investigation of their own?
Well, they are doing an internal investigation of their own.
But it seems like, I don't know how thorough it is. I mean, it seems like a lot of times we hear these things come out in the news media, and then the guy is gone within an hour. Misty, do you have a comment on this?
Those knee-jerk reactions really aren't appropriate, and that's because, look, we have a tenet in our legal system. It's better for 10 guilty people to escape than for one innocent person to suffer, right? That's part of our mentality with the legal system. So when you're talking about these issues that are not being prosecuted in a court of law, and they're not in a criminal court, they're not in a civil court where you have due process, you have the presumption of innocence. In a civil court, you have discovery, you have depositions, you're getting every piece of the puzzle before it goes before a jury who ultimately makes a determination of whether the law is broken. Here you have the court of public opinion. You have the accusation being almost as bad as being convicted. So it is a difficult situation from the employer perspective. Look, I think you're going to see a lot of cases coming, backlash, improper terminations. Of course, that's based on whether or not, wrongful termination based on any sort of employment contract. A lot of these people have contractual relationships, so maybe there's the grounds for it or not. But the right way to handle something like this, from a legal perspective, sheerly taking my opinion on it out of it, is what CBS had done with Charlie Rose, which is to suspend and investigate and make sure that before you make that determination about whether or not you're going to terminate somebody, that you're actually looking into the facts and circumstances that led to the allegation. So it really is important to remember that the allegation doesn't mean guilty right out the gate, and that there certainly could be more to the story. On the flip side, of course, every instance of sexual harassment, every accusation must be taken seriously. but it does not at the fate of the accused. They have some rights too.
Natalie, what's your response to this? I mean, obviously.
look.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, companies don't have to hold themselves, just to respond to Misty, to the same standards as a court of law, because they're private companies, so they can do what they want.
Yeah.
However, I do see her point here that we don't want to wrongfully start firing people and ruining their reputations and livelihoods based on an allegation that has yet to be vetted and investigated. What's your take?
There's two different things at odds here: changing the laws and or implementing and following the laws, and changing workplace culture. Those are two very different things, okay? So we have to take a look at both. Whether these allegations hold up in a court of law remains to be seen. But it's the workplace culture, and I believe what these companies are doing is looking at the overall allegations. And they did do some investigation regarding Charlie Rose before they released him from his job. Whether that would hold up for the particular accuser in a court of law is something different. It's very different. But I think that we need to start changing overall in this country the workplace culture, and that the views of women as objects in a workplace, and policies must be enforced, as I said earlier, but there must be meaningful consequences. Okay, and I think that's where the change needs to occur. It's not just having the zero tolerance policies. It's not just educating the employees, but it must be enforced, and there must be meaningful consequences.
Well, I think this has been a very interesting conversation about sexual harassment and assault in the workplace. It's one, a lot of times when we're watching it on cable news, it's like 2-minute bites. And I think it's really important for companies and women who are in these situations to realize what their legal rights are. And the most important thing, Misty, and I think Natalie, you would agree, is the minute you feel uncomfortable in a situation, you can't wait. You need to tell someone. You need to raise a red flag. You can't let it continue. And on the company side, if someone raises a flag to them, they need to investigate. They need to react. They need to make sure they're following their standards and protocols.
Absolutely.
And have them in place.
Yes, have them in place, and then, as Natalie very rightfully pointed out, make sure that they're uniformly implementing those procedures, because they're there for a reason. They're there to make sure that the employees are protected, that everybody is free from an environment of harassment and discrimination. And that's obviously what we all want from a society perspective, and we want to get there and make sure that everyone has the ability to do that. So thank you so much, Natalie. We really appreciate your time today and your insights, and we hope to have you back soon. As more of these cases unravel, we'll continue to break it down.
Thank you.
Thank you. Continue.